this video we're going to be putting in the first or the lower deck. The deck, however, fits really poorly as the hull seems to be badly moulded. A majority of the lower deck is going to be held in place by the upper deck pieces and not glue, just to accommodate the poor hull fitting. I had to fit the lower deck as best as possible. And I used Tamiya white top glue instead of extra thin along the sides inside the hull to ensure a firm attachment and to keep the deck in place. You can see that I've already attached some of the rigging lines to the decks, as fitting them at the end would be nearly impossible. And because I'm using easy line for the rigging, I have attached beads to the ends of the lines to prevent them from springing back inside the model and to add weight to keep them out of the way for now. With that done, I was able to turn my attention to the other deck pieces and the smaller parts that needed to be fitted to them to add detail to the model. The first parts to go on were 4 large hatches, 2 at the stern and 2 at the bow. And after a quick dry fit, they could be glued into place. I'm not going to show every little bit get glued into place, as there's a lot and nobody wants a 3-hour gluing video. So I'm going to skip ahead to after bits are put into place and just give you some idea of the process behind it. So with all 4 pieces in place, we can move on. One of the things I do like about this kit is it doesn't take a lot to change the overall appearance. And as we move on, you'll see just how little you have to do to change the overall appearance of the kit. The next part to be fitted is this forward bulkhead, and the outer hull is painted in white, whilst the deck parts and bulkheads are painted in a more off-white. This is to demonstrate the difference in paints used at the time, and also to give some contrast to the model itself. These 2 photos are good examples of the difference in the colours, the hull being a brilliant white while walkways and the interior were a more off-white colour. And it simply locates on 2 locating pins and is glued into place. Two small wing type sections are next to go on, and they fit just above the bulkhead that we just put in place. And they are just simply glued to the deck section. We can now move on to one of the smaller deck pieces, so the hull can be put to one side for protection while we're working on the other sections. The first step on this section is 3 small bulkheads that fit together to form a box shape, and these simply get glued to the deck section following the raised guidelines on the deck. And once all 3 pieces are in place, it will look something like this. The next part is an almost identical process to form a small box room at the front of the deck section. And the end result should look something just like this. 2 ventilation cowls go on next, one either side of the front room section. And we can go ahead now and fit that into the hull. And it fits snugly onto the stern section you can see the two locating holes for it to fit into, and it's just glued into place here. The bulkhead section sits just underneath between the lower deck and this raised section, and you can just go ahead and slide that in and glue it into place. You can see that it's starting to come together quite nicely, so we can put the hull to one side and get on with the next section. We're going to start with the bow section, and the first thing to go in is this derrick, and that goes near the front. And once you've got that in and got it straight, you can put it to one side to dry for a little bit. And there's also a bulkhead that sits underneath here that goes between the lower deck and this piece, but we're not going to fit that just now. We're going to wait till it's closer to going onto the model itself, and we're going to just finish off installing the smaller parts on this section before touching up the paintwork, so they'll be ready to fit onto the hull. And the next part is some tie-offs. And there's three of these. There's two that are marked on the sprue as number 31s, and one that's 31A. So just make sure that you get them in the correct positions. To start with the 31s first. This will just prevent any confusion. And they're just glued into place at the rear of the bow section. And now we can move on to the 31A, and that goes just behind the box section by the wave brake. And we can leave that to dry for the time being. And the final stage we're going to do before fitting it onto the hull is to do the capstans. And there are 6 of these in total. And also a ventilation cowl. So I'll go ahead and do that. So there we have the almost completed bow section. All that needs to go on now is the bulkhead underneath and railing over the top. And the railing fits on just behind the tie-offs. And we just need to paint the capstans and the other bits that we fitted before putting it onto the hull. So I'll move on to the stern section now. The first part to go onto the stern section is a raised walkway and the steering station, and that fits on the almost right to the back on 2 pillars. So I'll go ahead and fix that. And once I've fitted that, I've added another rigging line to that part of the deck. We can now move on. The next part to be fitted is the rear bulkhead that supports the stern balcony deck. And unlike the bow deck, this is being fitted prior to the deck being fitted to the ship. And once that's been allowed to dry, we can move on to the next parts to be fitted. The next part is a staircase that leads down from the steering point to the balcony deck. The process of fitting these staircases can be very difficult as they're so small and they have to sit at an angle above the deck. Now we need to fit some ventilation cowlings and a deck stuff and a couple of capstans to the rest of the deck. This is done in 3 areas: the front, the mid and the rear. So we'll get on and do that. The final part in this section is to fit 2 cranes to the rear of the balcony deck. And it can now be fitted to the rear of the hull, which I'll do off camera. And also off camera, I'm just going to be fitting a couple more cranes and some staircases to link the front upper and the rear upper decks to the lower deck. And in the next episode, we're going to be looking at the mid deck, but there's not an awful lot to do on that, so we'll probably be doing the upper deck as well. And then we can start looking at fitting all the final assembly pieces, the smokestacks and the rigging lines for them. Hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.